And so I'm going to present to you, so the evaluation of the first 91 Swedish EIP projects, how successful they are, and some challenges and lessons learned. But let me already now, before I even start with the first slide, share with you the main conclusion of this presentation. If you are interested in evaluating the success of your operational groups in your countries, and I know that some of you are already or have already, or maybe are thinking about it, just do it. It's fun, it's exciting, and you will learn a lot. And this will help you to, this will help your thinking forward. So my advice, if you decide to do that, or in doing that, is that look at what others have done before, because there has been some evaluations already, to get ideas, to get inspiration, and to perhaps also avoid some mistakes which have already been made. And then decide what's important for you and in relation to how you have decided to implement the EIP-Agri in your country, and then just go ahead. So hopefully this presentation will provide you with some ideas, inspiration, and some challenges that we faced. So that's the main takeaway. And we will come back, of course, in different ways to this. So, yes, the first projects that we had were finalized in 2017, so that's why it started then. So first of all, just to give you some background, so Sweden is a small country of 10 million people, and we have 55,000 farmers. We have about 3 million hectares totally of farmland and permanent grasslands, and that is about 7% of the total area of our country. So we have the challenge, of course, that things are very dispersed, but that's just the nature of our country. And so the EIP-Agri program is administered by the Central National Agency, the Swedish Board of Agriculture. We have implemented it as a two-step procedure. First, in the first step, you apply for some smaller funding to form an operational group, and in the next step, you apply for actual funding for the implementation phase. And the rural network provides innovation support services to those who are interested in applying to this EIP program. And that's an important thing, and I'm more interested in that. So if any of you work like this or have a similar function in your country, it would be really interesting to talk to you more about that later, because this is an interesting support service, I think. Yes, and being a small country, we have still invested quite a lot. Sweden is one of the countries who has put the most funding into this measure. So our authorities have had the thinking, or our politicians, that innovation is important. So it's been quite a big thing with us. You can see there that in total we've used a lot of money, 83 million euros over these two cap periods. Yes. And then to turn to evaluation of EIP-Agri in Sweden. First of all, we had a program evaluation, which was running between 16 and 21, and it's been published at least 2 publications, a Swedish report and an English scientific paper as well. And that was more focused on the administrative procedures, the handling of applications, the selection and of the funding of the operational groups and so on. And then in the end of 23, the Board of Agriculture decided that it was time to evaluate also the actual funded projects. And this is the evaluation which I will now present. And the aim was to analyze the finalized operational groups regarding their success or maybe failures, and provide some insights on critical success factors. And we were 3 researchers. This was not only me, so a colleague from my university and also a colleague from another university, Linköping University in Sweden. And what we did was, so this was our conceptual model, and I'll go into this a little bit. Because since we were asked to evaluate success factors, we decided to use a framework called the fuzzy front end. And it's a framework that is supposed to be able to tell from the things that, well, the framework states that the things that you do in the very early phase of innovation, it's what's really important. So if you put a lot of energy in the very early phase, this will determine the rate of success in the project in the later stages. And that's what you can see on the left side here, the success factors. The group dynamics, the financing, how you work with external actors and external knowledge. How is your market and customer knowledge? How do you work with intellectual property rights, for example? And how do you manage internal coordination within the group? And how is the absorptive capacity? So that is the way you take in new knowledge, but how you integrate it with the knowledge that you already have. So that's, to the left is the fuzzy front end framework, which is a theory that we decided to use in this specific project. And then we evaluated the projects, and we thought that it would be some moderators, for example, the type of project manager, the type of innovation, the sector of innovation, the group size, and maybe also the budget. And I will come back to that later. And then the results we presented on 3 levels. So national, like program level, and then project level for each individual group, and then individual level as well. So that was our way of setting up this study. Yes. And just to move on to give you some of the technicalities of how we did this, we used web-based survey with a lot of questions. There were bars where they could move between 1 or 7 or 1 and 0 and 100, and we distributed these to all of the 91 OG managers of the completed projects at that time. And we had the contact details to the project manager, the OG managers, but we didn't have the contact details to the group participants. And this is why we couldn't distribute the service to all participants in all the groups. And this was a drawback, because now we only reached the project managers. And we tried to ask them, could you please forward it to all the members in your groups? And some did, and did really well, but some didn't, or maybe they did and the group members didn't reply as well. So the responses for the participants became too few for us really to make good use of. So, but that's the technicalities of this, that we had only the contact details to the OG managers. And in a way it was interesting, because for some groups we got actually more than one person responding that the person was the manager. So that was interesting. And then we took the most full response, or if they were both very full, we took the first one that we got. So anyway, so this resulted from 91 people, this resulted in 75 responses, which is extremely high. But only 66 of them were complete, so it's still a very high response rate, while 66 is not a very large number still for doing statistical analysis. And on this we did descriptive analysis and correlation analysis. And then we also did some in-depth interviews with project managers to follow up on this and to give some more flesh on the bones. And this was qualitatively analyzed. And we tried actually here to purposefully sample it, to have half of them being groups that we knew had been very successful, and half of them being groups that we knew maybe not yet has been successful, just to get a breadth here. And of course, all data collections have their weaknesses. All surveys face some kind of unreliability in responses because of how people interpret your questions and so on. And in this case, there is also the weakness of that project managers or OG managers, they of course have interest to manage in relation to the EIP. And for example, they may reply positively because if they feel that they're dependent on the funding, for example, or if they wish to apply again. And also we discovered, or we knew already, that some organizations were involved in multiple operational groups. And so maybe they were then even more, or had more reasons to be biased. Yes, And then for each of, just to give you, I won't go into the technicalities a lot, but for each of these factors, there were a lot of responses, that went into it. So behind every factor, there's a large number of aggregated survey responses, and this one relates to coordination, collaboration, and absorptive capacity. So yeah, the survey was set up like that. So here for some results then. This shows who applies to the Swedish programs. And it also gives you a hint of the direction. So researchers here correspond to nearly 30%, but it is actually the same in the overall EU. If you look in the overall EU evaluation that was published in 2024, researchers are also the biggest group and also 28 to 29%. So it's similar. But this shows you here that the direction of the Swedish EIP is to fund innovations that are truly new to the market. It's supposed to be a significant originality and not primarily testing a new product or production method in a certain group of farmers who haven't tested this before. So, and this also shows the rationale for the innovation support service of prospective applicants, because if you take, for example, the group of researchers or innovation brokers, which are the yellow one with 17% at the bottom, they are usually used to writing applications and they do it all the time and they know how to do it. But if you take the group, for example, farmers at the top with 11% or small and medium-sized businesses, with 26% to the left, they are not as used to writing applications. They're not as skilled in application writing, but with this innovation support service, they can get some help with that. So we have quite a large group here of small and medium-sized enterprises compared to, for example, the EU average, which was, where did I put that? Oh yeah, here we go. Presented in the EU report. Okay, so furthermore, some more data. We had 58% male, and the average age was 57, and 42% females, with the average age being 53. And if you look, for example, in the small and medium-sized enterprise bar there's equal male and female contribution. So for being an innovation program, it's actually more women than usual. So that's interesting for the EIP-Agri. And so far, it's been fairly straightforward, but this is where we ran into some more philosophical questions. So now, I present you here with an example and the philosophical question of what is actually the innovation. It turned out that it can be interpreted in multiple ways, what constitutes the actual innovation, even within the same operational group. So this was one of the groups that I interviewed, and I presume that the innovation here is a sparkling wine made out of black currant with the champagne method. And this is a complete innovation because it's never been done before. So to me, of course, this was the innovation. But when I talked to the group manager, he said, no, the innovation is to get a revival of the black currant production in northern Sweden, because far up north, there are not that many crops that you can grow, and there used to be a big production of black currant because they like the midnight sun and they grow really well there, and that had been going down a lot because of competition from other countries, and so the revival of getting this crop back, getting another one of the few crops back that they could be, that was for him the big innovation. But for the marketing person, of course, the sparkling wine was the innovation. So keep in mind that it's not always straightforward what is the actual innovation, and that people, even within the same group, can have completely different interpretations of what is the innovation. And of course, this affected how we then ask the questions in the survey. And also the question of what is the type of innovation. It's not always easy to say. In this case, for example, with a pig sound monitoring system, this could be sold as a product to a farmer to use in his stable, but it could also be sold as a service. For example, if the farmer subscribes to this, it might be more convenient for the farmers to do it. So if you ask an operational group, what type is your innovation? Is it a product or service? They might not know, because it depends on the business model that they're then developing, and that might change over time, actually. So just to say that if you get a reply, it might not be that reliable. Yes, and this made us ask respondents to, when they replied to this survey, to focus on the most important innovation, because also they could have the view that there are several innovations being developed in this group. So what is the most important one? You keep that in mind, and that's the one that you're going to think of when you reply or respond to this survey. Yeah, so that's how we chose to do that. Yeah, and our survey showed that the most common type of innovation mentioned was a new technology, which is the red half there. And but yeah, so the type of innovation was difficult to obtain reliable, and more than a third choose other. And so this resulted in that we couldn't use the type of innovation as a moderator. Like, we didn't analyze the replies in relation to type of innovation, because there were so many that replied others. And what we did, just to get an idea, to show an overview, is that for the ones that did reply other, this shows the picture where we have actually put them in a group, depending on how, because we asked them early on in a free text to describe their most important innovation. And we also had them connected to the project that they did. So this is like, so part of this is an interpretation from our side. And this is why we decided not to use this as a basis for further analysis. And here we ask them, what's the sector of your innovation? Is it crop production? As you can see, crop production has the most, animal husbandry, and then food processing, and then value chain. So this was a total of 66. But also in this one, almost 25% shows other, and we then put them into this group just to be to provide this overview. But this also made that we didn't use the sector. So the learning here is that when you ask this kind of questions, it's hard to get reliable data, because people or some innovations are tricky to really accurately put into a specific silo. Yes, so now to some results. So here is the replies where they answer the question, to what extent did the most important innovative solution that you developed in your project meet the group's expectations? And here 75% say, well, it did adequately or even exceeded the expectations. And this is in line with the overall, with the EU evaluation published in 24 as well, where also around 75% has this reply. And so 25% here is partially. But then when we went on to ask them, is your innovative solution ready for others to use? Here you can see that only 50% replied, yes, definitely, it's ready for others to use. So 75% said, well, we have reached our expectations, but only 50% here is definitely, the solution is definitely ready for others to use. And 12% said no, and almost 40% said, oh, somewhere in between here. Yeah, and then we went on to ask them, within the next 3 years, do you believe that the most important innovation you developed in your group will be? And then we asked them to indicate this on a scale from rarely used to very commonly used. And I just divided them into the quarters here, but as you can see, 25%, they don't really believe that their innovations will be used. And well, there is 50% that are on the top half of this, but only about 25% are sure that this, the idea that we develop will be used commonly. So there is a definitely a challenge here when it comes to adoptions. Yeah, and then we looked into why are some projects more successful than others. So here we used the fuzzy front end framework, and we measured a lot of things in this survey. And I will not go into the details here. I will just give you a brief picture on this. And so here is a summary of some of the correlations. So the success drivers to your left here, I'll give you an example in just 1 minute. You don't have to remember anything here. The success drivers to the left, they are, if you're good at doing the things to your left, they would lead to a higher adoption likelihood to the right. I'll show you that example. And at the bottom you have innovation culture. What leads to innovation culture? If you have worked on adoption likelihood, external knowledge use, good internal coordination and communication, and absorptive capacity, for example. But just to show you an example here, the things that were significantly connected to improve adoption likelihood is, of course, if your innovation is ready for others to use. That is, of course, I mean, that might be a no-brainer in a way, but it also shows how important it is that the groups actually work with finalizing their development within the project time. Because if it's not finished by the time the project is finished, then the adoption likelihood goes down a lot. The innovativeness, that's the height, the innovation height, was also correlated. So if you have a more innovative, those who had a more innovative idea, they were more likely to also say that it's more likely that this will be adopted. And if you work with intellectual property rights, we didn't have a lot of projects who did work with that. Some did, a few did, and those who did, they tended to have be much more related to success factors, such as adoption likelihood, for example. And then also those who rated that the potential users would have benefits related to efficiency and growth in their own business, in their own firms, in their own farms, that the innovation would bring them a competitive advantage, and that it would enable a market expansion and customer engagement for them. They were also much more likely to say that, yes, this adoption we strongly believe, or this innovation we strongly believe will be adopted. So that's how this correlation analysis work. And I will add one thing for which I didn't have a slide, but when it comes to innovation culture on the individual level, this is something that is a goal on the EU level. It's actually not one of the Swedish goals, but we seem to have gotten it anyway, because our respondents reported that being part of an EIP-Agri project or an operational group had made it more likely that they would, first of all, pursue innovative ideas in the future, and also that it would be that it was more likely that they would collaborate with other organizations or businesses or other actors in the future. And an interesting finding was that this had no correlations with any of the success factors or whether the groups had reached their goals or not. So innovation culture is something that you get if your project is successful or not. It's just being part of a operational group and working on an innovation will make you more innovative, or will contribute to your innovation culture anyway. And that's, in a way, it's really, I think it was interesting and also a relief, because of course, by definition, not all innovations can be successful. Innovation is always risky, right? But you still get the taste of it. Yes, and to sum up, the last finding, when it came to budget, like we didn't have a lot of data, but what we did was that we divided them into two groups. They had a mean of around 330,000 euros per group. And we just saw the half that were on the smaller side or on the bigger side. And what we could see there is that there were no correlations between a bigger budget and any of the success factors. On the other hand, a smaller budget was significantly correlated with the group saying we reached our goals. And this is maybe surprising, because you think if you have more resources, then you should be more able to do more things. But it might also be like if you have a smaller project, it's just easier and less complex, and maybe also less partners. And so maybe less complexity makes it easier to actually reach your goals. Because it was almost, it was nearly correlated, very closely, significantly correlated, correlation between a smaller budget and that the innovation was ready for others to use. So this means that the probability of EIP groups achieving their goals that decreased as their budgets increased. But again, I mean, the level of innovation might also be a factor here, because commercializing radical innovations is more complicated than a simple ideas with a lower level of innovation. So supporting bigger projects might be riskier. So that might be, and I mean, innovation is risk. And if we want to develop innovation, then we might be, maybe we should, take some risk. So, yes. Yes, and so what did this add up to? Because of course the Board of Agriculture wanted us to make some recommendation based on this. And so we made 3 recommendations here. First of all, to prioritize proposals with realistic plans to really get their innovations ready within the project period. But now, I must say, this is a contradiction in terms, again, because if you work with innovation, then by definition, they're also unpredictable. And so what we ask them to do when they hand in their application is that we ask them to have a very detailed plan of what you're going to do developing your innovation. And that's an oxymoron in a way. So this is, that's why I say realistic plans, because in such plans, I think you need to be aware that you need to plan for unexpected things to happen, surprises to happen, and be able to take new turns, and things to take new turns, unexpected turns as well. And secondly, we also saw that good market and customer knowledge and clear plans for market introduction was also very much related to success. So that's also an important thing. And they have actually already improved their criteria on this specific point. Secondly, we recommended that the policymakers for the program would consider or facilitating the operational group's connections with business incubators and business advisory organizations, because there are a network of that. We have a well built out system of that in our country, but today it's not at all working with agriculture and food, because I don't know why, maybe you have it in your countries as well, we like to work in silos. But I mean, there is a lot of knowledge here that these groups could also use, and especially if you feel that they as we have seen, they need to improve, for example, market and customer knowledge and their business plans and so on. So that's the second thing. And the third one was that at the program level, we saw that there are many goals, and we saw that some of them had been very well met, such as increased profitability, competitiveness, and use of innovative technology, but others has not been as much met on the national level, such as innovations working with renewable energy, solar erosion and land management, diversification, and short food chains, for example. So this opens for the questions, this opens up for the question of how to prioritize between different applications on a national level, yes, for the future. So those were our recommendations. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Sure. Yes, definitely. That's fine. Yes, so Ines says we have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Yes, 1 or 2 questions before we move into the next session. Would you like to ask anything to Lisa? 1 or 2 questions? Yes, Hannah.
If I understood correctly, you had 91 projects and 66 answers from that. Was there a correlation between how old the project was or how long ago it finished?
I don't know that actually. We didn't analyze on that. You mean the ones that didn't reply or the ones, yeah. No, I don't know that. We can look into that. Yeah. Do you have a theory?
I have a theory, yes, that usually EIP operation groups are short term. And after it finished, it's so hard to reach the manager again because they don't have to answer to anything. That's why I was asking.
No, I mean, yes, and you could be right because there's some of the emails, of course, they bounced. I mean, we didn't have the contact details to them anymore. Some of them. Yes, Patricia.
I have another theory, at least for my country, that, as you said, many coordinators coordinate several operational groups. In general, they are universities. So they answer once for 3-4 operational groups.
Yeah, I mean, we specifically asked them to give a reply for each of their EIP because we could see that. Yeah, but still, no, it's one of those practical things you need to consider.